-5, we birth, from frame -5 to frame 0, we birth 2 particles, and those are 2 missiles. We position them on these 2 objects, which is launch point right and launch point left. If I look in the top-down view, those are basically those spheres that I showed you earlier, which are here, here, and here. Those are the 2 launch points. You could obviously assign those launch points onto geometry in your scene. You know, you could have space fighters, and then you could actually have your missiles being launched from the space fighters. We give them a speed, which is 900 plus 100 variation, just to give them a bit of randomness in their velocity. And we've got a divergence value of 14. That's just to make sure that they don't both fire off in exactly the same angle. If we have a look at this in perspective mode again, and I move this around a little bit, the actual speed of the particles is given by the actual particle flow icon. And if I just look through the camera again, there we go. So then we just send out these 2 particles to a new event, and this is called missile tracking, and we're using find target again. And you can see that again, we're using, I did originally use the space fighter's body, the mesh, but I found that actually was quite slow, and it really wasn't necessarily. At the end of the day, what I decided to do was just to use an icon. Now, if you wanted to have multiple spaceships and multiple missiles going to different spaceships, I would actually use mesh objects, and that would then assign a random spaceship to each particle, and obviously each particle is a missile, so you'd have this sort of a random assignment going on here. So that would make it much more flexible if you use mesh objects and you had a list of them here. We then use a shape instance, and we can see we're using the space torpedo, which is this object here. We're rotating it using speed space follow, and that basically makes sure that the torpedo actually follows the direction of travel that the particle is following along. And then we've got an age test, which is greater than 51, and that's basically used to send our particle on to the next event, which is where it explodes. Now obviously we could have that particle, if we wanted to, collide with the spaceship, and we could use collision detection to then pass it on to the next event. Now in this case, I basically just wanted to have the particle hit the spaceship on frame 50, 51, whatever, and therefore I've just used this exact age test here. While it's heading there, if I actually scrub on the timeline a little bit, you'll see there's our particle, and you can see that the actual torpedo mesh is following the direction of travel, and in comes our second torpedo from here. If I scrub it so it's just coming into view, you can see it hasn't got a missile trail. So if I just turn on spawn here, you still won't actually see anything, because I've got these delete operators in here, which has just been used as switches just to make sure that all our effects aren't turned on at once. You can see I've got one here in the Ringwave, I've got another one here in Ringwave phosphors, and I've got another one here in ballwave phosphors. So that's just making sure that everything is invisible at once. So I'll just turn that off, and there we are. We've got our trail of particles behind our missile. So if I just press play, you can see it's emitting these particles coming out. Now the first thing we do is we split off 50% of the particles. We're spawning by travel, so there's an awful lot of particles being emitted here. We split off 50% of them in, we keep 50% in here obviously. The other 50% are split off here into a second event called Missile Trail Spread, which is what you can actually see here. If I change this to be in a slightly different color, there you go. It doesn't actually scrub very well, obviously. Probably need to be cached so we could scrub through it more smoothly. And you can see I've got the display of this missile trails focus turned off at the moment, so I'll just turn that back on. There we go, and I'll change the color so it's a little bit darker so you can differentiate between the two. So now you can see you've got this very diffuse trail of particles being fired out, and you've also got this more sort of focused trail. You can see we're using shape tetra, we're rotating them randomly, we're assigning a material, which is the material exhaust material, which is down here. This is just using the gradient ramp for the color. So we have this color here, and we're using an opacity map as well, using particle age and a gradient. And you'll note that the gradient color is actually blue, and in the finished result that I've shown you, you'd actually notice maybe that